September 11th, 1982, Southern California at Florida. The Gators introduced themselves on the national stage. Keith Jackson, Frank Broyles, and the national television audience on ABC awaited this unusual intersectional showdown between one of college football's blue bloods and an upstart program that was beginning to find their footing early on in year 4 of the Charlie Pell era. Pell's infamous 0-10-1 preamble in 1979 was beginning to feel like a distant memory heading into the 1982 season thanks to consecutive bowl appearances in 1980 and in 1981. Sports Illustrated took notice, highlighting Pell's Gators in a short feature in its September 1982 college football preview issue. There's a lot of do's and don'ts in the coaching book written as law, Pell told SI. And in 1982, we violate more of them than any group I've ever been associated with. You do not schedule 2 teams like Miami and Southern Cal back-to-back. You do not schedule Mississippi State and LSU back-to-back. You do not schedule Auburn and Georgia back-to-back. You do not play Kentucky in Lexington in November. And you do not have 3 open dates. We've got all of those things. Pell continued. Will be tested to the seams. Our concern is how quickly our freshmen can help us. With our schedule, we'll have to drive hard in the preseason, reach a peak early, and then meet the challenge of maintaining that over a long period of time. Or, as Pell also put it in the Sports Illustrated preview, the 1982 schedule is like the Burma Road. And though that reference may not resonate with the youth of today, it may not have resonated with the youth of 1982, as when Pell said it, it was a 40-year-old reference at that time.
Deep in the Chin Hills of northern Burma, British, Chinese, and American troops are fighting to reopen the supply routes to China. They are fighting the Japanese, but also disease, hot days and frozen nights, and through a long period of each year, the flooding rain. Side by side, the machinery of the West and the labor of the East. The road was cut from the mountains, and with the rain, the mountains piled back onto the roads. Through the hills under the glaring sun, on mule pack, on men's shoulders, and in trucks, the supplies go on over the top of the world and through to the embattled Allies.
Let's get back to USC.
It is a blistering hot day at Florida Field in Gainesville. The temperature up around 90-odd degrees. On the field, surely well over 100. We'll have more than 72,000 people to watch this afternoon as Southern California meets Florida for the first time.
Much like modern times, the Florida football program tended to play the vast majority of their games within the friendly confines of the Southeast. If you count Utah in 1977, this was only the 8th time in the history of the program that Florida had met an opponent from the Pac-10. So the Gators rarely had the opportunity to measure the program against more nationally known brands like USC. Yeah, the Gators were known for occasionally rising up and being pesky with the likes of SEC powers like Alabama or Georgia, but they did not play these types of non-conference games with any level of frequency. So this was a huge opportunity to impress on the national stage.
And John Robinson worried Frank about coming here, playing in the afternoon, and getting this kind of weather, and it's just like the good Lord is from Florida. He's given him all the heat he can handle. For Florida, I see this as maybe the biggest image game they have ever played.
I think so, Keith. It's a golden opportunity.
Another element here, too. I don't think Southern California can afford to come in here in the least bit cocky. They're not going to just puff and blow Florida away.
Keith, I don't believe there's any imbalance of talent here. Charlie Pell has been convincing his team all week that they can win this ball game. They expect to win it, and this is the attitude that Florida must have instead of what they've had in the past. They may hope to win.
Over the last few seasons, the transformation of the Florida program occurred as much off the field as it did on the field. Pell's ambition was beginning to take tangible form when the South End Zone expansion project increased Florida Field's capacity to 72,000.
One of the most important aspects of the new South Stands project is the Ben Hill Griffin Jr. Athletic Training Center, a complex which gives Florida athletes the opportunity to grow and develop to their fullest potential.
There's no one anywhere that can have a more modern, more complete training center that benefits the student athlete, from medical care, from his facilities in weight training and strength development, to the exercise area and the handball courts and the racquetball courts, and his dressing facilities and meeting areas. The entire complex designed solely for the development of the student athlete. That kind of puts a halo around that Ben Hill Griffin Training Center for us. A dream come true for the University of Florida.
Completion of the Ben Hill Griffin Jr. Athletic Training Center symbolizes a major step forward for the Florida football program, and it's one that will benefit student athletes for years to come.
The artificial turf, fondly known around Gainesville as Doug's Rug since former UF head coach Doug Dickey installed it in 1971, would remain, and the stadium was slowly morphing into what we now know as the Swamp. The shiny new project also included an athletic training center, a skybox tower, and a modern press box, debuting just in time for one of the most brutal home slates in school history. Number 16 Florida proved themselves right off the bat by downing Howard Schnellenberger, Jim Kelly, and the number 15 Miami Hurricanes 17-14 on opening day, thanks to an acrobatic, one-handed leaping touchdown grab by fullback James Jones late in the fourth quarter. The win propelled Florida into uncharted territory as Sports Illustrated made QB Wayne Peace the first Gator to grace the cover of its magazine. Though Pell's program had risen just in time for its moment in the national spotlight, the Gators still had plenty to prove. Charlie Pell was hired to win championships, but a nationally televised win against a well-respected powerhouse like USC had the potential to carry significant weight in the Florida history books. Since 1960, the Trojans had claimed at least a share of 4 national titles, appeared in 11 Rose Bowls, and produced 4 Heisman Trophy winners. Running backs Mike Garrett, O.J. Simpson, Charles White, and Marcus Allen, who was the 1981 Heisman winner that just departed for the NFL, had each helped build the legacy surrounding a simple sweep play known as student body right under head coaches John McKay and John Robinson. Robinson was entering into his 7th season in LA with a record of 59-11-2. USC started the season ranked 13th in the country. He had succeeded where so many fail, by following a legend and leaving a legacy of his own. Robinson would end up leaving USC after the 1982 season to stay in town and take the Rams job. Folks in Florida knew all about Robinson's predecessor, John McKay, as the quick-witted head coach that had jumped to the NFL to take over the Tampa Bay expansion franchise in 1976 after 16 years at USC. After one loss early on in his tenure at Tampa, a reporter asked McKay what he thought of his team's execution that day, and McKay quipped, "I'm in favor of it." USC did not miss a beat when Robinson took over. In his first year, the Trojans were the 1976 Pac-8 champions. It expanded to the Pac-10 in 1978. And in 1978, the team engineered a split claim to the national title with Bear Bryant and the Crimson Tide. Southern Cal won over 75% of their games under McKay and Robinson, while for comparison, the Gators had only won 59% of their games over that same stretch. In addition to traveling cross-country into hostile territory, Southern California's 1982 debut would feature a slew of new offensive weapons, such as quarterback Sean Salisbury, who would be making his first career start as the signal caller for the Trojans. The defenses stole the show early on. Poor Sean Salisbury was introduced to the college game with Wilber Marshall on the other side of the ball, while linebacker Jack Del Rio and the USC defense kept the Gators off the scoreboard until the second quarter. But after a sluggish start on offense, a fumble recovery by the Gators led to the first score of the game in the second quarter, thanks to 2 spectacular catches from Florida wide receiver Spencer Jackson. Peace threw a lob pass that split the zone coverage and carried a little too close to the sideline. However, Jackson, fully aware of his approach toward the sideline, slowed down and made an over-the-shoulder grab while keeping 1 foot in bounds to set the Gators up with a 1st and goal from the USC 2-yard line. The Trojans then held firm, stuffing 3 Gators rushing attempts and forcing Pell to call a timeout before 4th down to settle the Gators down a bit. On 4th and goal from the 1-yard line, offensive coordinator Mike Shanahan dialed up every fan's favorite play in that situation: a fade route to the corner of the end zone. That works about, what, once or twice a year, right? Why pass up the opportunity to hand to senior fullback / wrecking ball of a runner, James Jones? Can't understand the call, but it was the call nonetheless. So coming out of the timeout, the Gators lined up under center on the right hash mark with a split back set. Chris Faulkner lined up as the tight end to the right, and future NFL head coach and fellow Gators tight end Mike Mularkey lined up next to left tackle Lomas Brown. USC stacked the box with 6 down linemen, 2 linebackers outside of the tight ends, and 2 backers positioned up the middle. Jackson was lined up wide to the left in a one-on-one matchup with the defensive back. Peace took the snap and quickly turned to lob a pass to the left side. The ball sailed toward the middle of the left sideline of the end zone, but once again, Jackson made an amazing over-the-shoulder Willie Mays style grab for the diving touchdown. First touchdown of the game, and the Gators take a 7-0 lead in the second quarter. The ball was coming straight over my head, Jackson told the media after the game. I wasn't sure whether to turn around or to take it over my shoulder. That's about the toughest catch to make. It takes total concentration on the football, and it can easily slip through your fingers. Shanahan marveled at the catch after the game as well, saying, "We hit that thing 85% of the time in practice and in games, but this was just an unbelievable catch." Anyone else skeptical of that 85% figure, or is that just me? Okay, Mike. With 2 minutes remaining in the first half, USC pinned the Gators at their own 3-yard line. Florida opened up with a conservative run up the middle, and the clock bled down to inside a minute 30 before the next snap. The ball was just shy of the UF 5-yard line when Peace fired a pass to the left. Wide receiver Dwayne Dixon beat the corner to the inside, caught the ball in stride at the 10-yard line, and broke the safety's tackle to sprint into the clear. He was slowed down just enough to be caught by a man in pursuit, but the Trojans did not make the tackle until 48 yards later, and Pell, who had initially seemed content to take a 7-0 lead into the locker room, suddenly had options. 2 plays later, Peace hit wide receiver Tyrone Young on a similar route, and the drive continued inside the USC 30-yard line. Jones caught a short pass and took it down to the USC 22-yard line on 1st down, and Southern Cal called a timeout with 44 seconds left in the first half. On the next play, Jones lined up with his hand in the ground directly behind Peace. A draw play was nearly interrupted by the right defensive tackle who had blown by the left guard, but fullback James Jones slipped out of the defender's grasp and was nearly tripped up before scampering toward daylight. The record crowd at Florida Field entered into a frenzied state, and the Gators secured a 14-0 lead heading into the locker room. The Gators defense forced another punt to open the second half. Florida's offense took over at their own 14-yard line, and just as the announcers were declaring that the difference in this game so far had been the experience at the quarterback position, Florida quarterback Wayne Peace dropped back and threw an interception into the hands of USC defensive back Troy West. The Gators pushed him out of bounds at the UF 19-yard line, and Salisbury led the Trojans onto the field for what was their best scoring opportunity to date. But once again, a man named Wilber Marshall shut down the Southern Cal attack. On the first play of the drive, Marshall blitzed off the left edge unchallenged and obliterated Salisbury. On the next snap, Marshall was in the backfield before Salisbury could hand it off to the running back and made the tackle 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. A free blitzing Marshall hurried Salisbury on a 3rd down pass. It resulted in an incompletion. 3 plays, minus 10 yards, all at the hands of Wilber Marshall. put a cherry on top, USC kicker Steve Jordan missed the field goal attempt with a kick that went wide right, and the Gators did not have to pay a price for what could have been a critical turnover. I had created a highlight tape of Marshall from this game a couple years back and posted it to Twitter, tagging Sean Salisbury in it as well. And Salisbury replied to the video, "Best individual performance I've seen in person. He was unbelievable. I should know. I felt it all day. Wilber was special." Fast forward to 2 minutes left in the third quarter. The scoreless Trojans managed to scrape together a drive which resulted in a 39-yard field goal attempt to cut the Florida lead to 14-3 and create a little bit of tension. Pell pulled Peace, who had struggled to get the offense moving in the third quarter, on the next series and gave senior quarterback Bob Hugo a shot. The offense tried to establish the ground game and drove into USC territory behind great runs from running back John L. Williams and James Jones. Hugo dumped a short pass to Malarkey to get inside the Trojans' 30-yard line. Hampton followed great blocking up the middle behind right guard Buddy Schulteis's dominant block of eventual consensus first-team All-American USC defensive lineman George Achika to get into the red zone. Florida eventually settled for a short field goal, and the Gators led 17-13 early in the fourth quarter. Cornerback Bruce Vaughn leapt and grabbed an interception on a third down in what doubled as a makeshift punt to give the Gators the ball back on their own 24-yard line. Peace entered back into the game, and Pell sought to bleed the clock. The offense managed to shave a little over 3 minutes off, and the Trojans took over at their own 34-yard line. On the first play of the drive, it appeared fullback John Kamana fumbled while fighting for more yardage, but officials overturned a Florida recovery and gave the ball back to USC. While the fans filled Florida Field with boos, Salisbury finally made a play through the air, connecting with an open wide receiver, Jeff Simmons, for a 34-yard gain down to the UF 27-yard line. Florida sophomore cornerback Ricky Eastman bit on a stop-and-go route, but recovered to make the tackle thanks to an underthrown ball that caused Simmons to slow down for the catch. On the next snap, vintage USC struck as running back Fred Crutcher outpaced a blitzing Marshall from the backside and went untouched behind great blocking for a 27-yard touchdown run. But that touchdown was overturned thanks to a holding penalty. The momentum could have swung on this play, but the Gators caught a huge break. USC seemed to find some confidence in their running game, but a complete lack of urgency allowed the clock to roll on as the Trojans meandered their way down the field. Salisbury dropped back on 3rd and 5, and Marshall viciously swiped at his right arm to send the ball sailing forward into the arms of USC center Tony Slayton, who rumbled forward for 3 yards. The lucky break set the Trojans up with a 4th and 2 on the UF 19-yard line. USC lined up with 3 tight ends and gambled with Salisbury's life by dialing up a play action in which the young quarterback rolled to his left. The bet paid off, and tight end Pat McCool slipped by the coverage to catch a simple lob pass for USC's first touchdown of the day. Robinson then decided to go for 2. And either Robinson was an analytics savant 30 to 40 years ahead of his time, or there was still no overtime in college football, and ties were definitely frowned upon for a national power like USC. The Trojans dialed up an open out route in the end zone, but running back Michael Harper could not hold on. A sure thing was suddenly in doubt. Pell stuck with Peace and ran it 3 times, but the Gators could not pick up first down yardage. UF punter Ray Criswell sent it back to the Trojans with 4:54 left on the clock. The confident Trojans took over at their own 38-yard line and opened with Salisbury's best pass of the day, a strike over the middle on a crossing route to wide receiver Timmy Ware for a 19-yard completion. A well-executed student body left allowed running back Michael Harper to sprint down to the UF 31-yard line, but an illegal use of the hands penalty nullified the big run. Another big break for the Gators. On the next play, USC went for it. Florida only rushed 3 as Salisbury took a deep drop. The young quarterback paused briefly when he reached the end of his drop and rolled right before heaving the ball into the end zone. A deeper throw would have given his receivers a shot, but an underthrown ball with defensive backs Bruce Vaughn, Tony Lilly, and Ivory Curry in coverage allowed the latter to put an end to the USC comeback attempt with a massive interception at the UF 2-yard line.
Goes deep for White. It is intercepted by Curry. Ivory Curry. It was a bad choice by Salisbury. Salisbury elected to go deep. He didn't throw it far enough, and the Gators come away with the 4th USC turnover. Number 8 interception.
Peace led the offense onto the field with just over 3 minutes remaining. Hampton bullied his way ahead for a 3-yard gain on first down, and for some reason, Shanahan called for a pass on second down. The pass attempt was Peace's first since the last interception he had thrown earlier in the half. The clock stopped at 2:43. Pell called a timeout to talk things over. On 3rd and 7 from their own 5-yard line, Peace dropped back and tried for Dixon along the sideline, but the wideout was forced out of bounds in order to make the catch. Undoubtedly, the conservative drive earlier in the quarter had haunted the offensive selection this drive. 3 plays and just over 30 seconds gone from the clock. Criswell trotted out to punt back to USC from near the back line of the end zone. A 39-yard kick gave the ball back to the Trojans with 2:29 left at the UF 44-yard line. The defense would have to come through one last time. Kamana took a short pass down to the UF 35-yard line, but a penalty on second down pushed the Trojans back to the UF 40-yard line.
Second down and about 7. With a minute 53 to play in the game, 17-9 Florida. Each team with 1 timeout remaining. It was 14-0 at halftime. Sean Salisbury going to put it up. He throws his 3rd interception of the day. It is picked off by Randy Clark.
He fumbled the ball, but Florida got it back.
And Florida Field with 73,238 people here, a new attendance record for the University of Florida erupts in a joyous roar with a minute and 33 to play.
Once again, the Gators opened with Hampton up the middle, and as the clock dropped under a minute, Florida fans broke out in a chorus of Florida had this one firmly within control so long as an OC by the name of Shanahan didn't mismanage another drive to melt the clock with a lead late in the game. A sweep play on second down pushed Williams toward the sideline, and a tackle carried him out of bounds to stop the clock at 35 seconds left as an electric crowd, blissfully unaware of the critical mistake, began to chant. On 3rd down, Williams cut a sweep to the right, back to the middle for a couple of yards. USC called its timeout with 27 seconds remaining as Criswell came out to punt near midfield. A max protection scheme kept the all-out punt block attempt at bay, and the high-hanging punt was caught at the USC 20-yard line with 21 seconds left to play. The Florida defense just needed one last stop to secure one of the most significant wins in the history of the program. But USC was not dead yet. While commentator Frank Broyles was singing the praises of the Florida coaching staff, Salisbury rolled left and drilled wide receiver Timmy White in stride over the middle.
I just wanted to congratulate the Florida staff. Just a tremendous job of preparation against this Southern Cal football team.
Sean Salisbury with the clock running, throws it down the middle. The pass is caught by White, and White's on the move.
White bolted toward the sideline and looked like he might get to the edge and race toward an improbable last-second touchdown, but Wilber Marshall's angle of pursuit headed him off just inside the UF 40-yard line, forcing White to cut inside, where a host of Gators brought him down at the UF 37-yard line. A personal foul for a late hit was tacked on at the end of the play, and USC advanced to the Gators' 22-yard line with 10 seconds left in the game. An illegal procedure penalty pushed USC back 5 yards and knocked 7 seconds off the clock. The Trojans were forced to rush to get up under center since the clock would start on the whistle, but Florida jumped off sides. USC would advance forward 5 yards and have one shot at the end zone with 1 second left on the clock from the UF 22-yard line. The Gators needed a play, and their best playmaker that day came through. Wilber Marshall blitzed off the edge, wrecked fullback John Kamana's attempt at a block, and stripped Salisbury to end the game. It was Charlie Pell's finest moment as the head coach of the Florida Gators. Pell broke into a sprint toward the south end zone with both arms raised in celebration as the orange and blue fight song blared in the background. The sheer joy of Pell's jaunt is the picture of what makes college football the greatest sport known to mankind.
One of the biggest wins in the University of Florida Gator football history. You don't think Charlie Pell is happy?
I don't blame him. That's a great picture. You know how a coach feels after a win like that.
Betcha.
Pell ended up coming back on the field and took a victory lap that day. He had earned it.
So once again, our final score, Florida 17, Southern California 9.
The next week, the Florida Gators would be ranked in the top 5 for the first time since 1968 and the second time in school history. And on this day in 1982, one can argue that the first bricks that built the modern-day Florida football program were laid in front of a national television audience in a big-time win against Southern California.